Good hello and welcome back to another installment of Wargaming. Whenever. It's still apathetic. It's still on the internet and it's still about wargaming. Mostly, unless we want to talk about something else, because apparently we are all ADHD man-children. This is a true fact, unlike those false facts. This evening, we have myself, Jonathan, we have Callum with us, and we have returning to Wargaming Whenever, the one, the only, Marcus.
Greetings, salutations all.
And all of his lovely chaos goodness. Because the simple fact is, chaos is the best faction, except for all of the other factions.
Certainly got the most flavour, but not so great on the tabletop, I would argue.
Look, I would disagree with you. I think that they're aggressively average on the tabletop, which means they're better than half. Which I mean is not bad.
I'll argue with that.
So this evening we have a fun topic that we'll get into a bit later: the good, the bad, and the ugly of tiny games of Warhammer. But first, games that we had recently. I had a couple of games. Marcus had a couple of games. Callum, did you have a couple of games?
I have had a couple of games.
Of Warhammer, or of Star Wars Legion, or of Crisis Protocol, or of what's the other one? I feel like there's another one there.
There's another one there. But the answer is yes.
Yes to all.
Actually,
Glorious.
I've rolled many dice this week. In the past week. So I've been teaching my kids how to play Marvel Crisis Protocol, and they love it.
That's just because you get to throw buildings at people, which who wouldn't love that?
Exactly. Yeah. You get to. It's interactive terrain.
That's
so
awesome.
you can throw. So all buildings and terrain have a size. So you can, depending on the size that you are or your strength that you are, you can throw a building at somebody. You can push somebody into a building and it does damage. Just really fun. And because I've been playing the Juggernaut, I've been picking up whole New York City apartment blocks and throwing them at characters. They've been loving it.
Which is totally fair, and I would definitely do that.
Yeah, I got to roll some dice for some Legion. Just a couple like a small little things, only about 300 points. Which, as far as Legion goes, their like standard match play is 800 points. So not as little as expected,
under half.
basically. Yeah. And I got to roll some more boarding actions, which I am becoming quite a fan of. I was going a little bit sour on GW stuff for a while. And actually, it's not even GW's fault. It was the fan base that I was getting over a little bit.
I get that.
Yeah. But no, boarding actions has been refreshing. It's similar enough to what we know to kind of pick up very quickly, but different enough to make it fresh and interesting, and kind of have to think a little bit differently. But I've really been liking it, especially interactions around walls and bends and stuff like that. But no, it was a lot of fun.
Sounds like it. Hindsight being what it is, Marcus. For the start of that crusade we started on the weekend, we should have started with boarding actions. That would have been sick.
Yes.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Actually, you know what you should have started off with?
Battlefleet Gothic.
Yes.
That's what we should have started off with.
Going then into Aeronautica, and then get into boarding actions, where there's a crash landing, and then you have to get into full-size skirmishes.
I would have thought
then ending with Apocalypse once everything comes in.
I would have thought it would be boarding actions then Aeronautica.
Well, say Aeronautica's like if you're boarding a ship, it'd be roughly about the same time, because Aeronautica's they're kind of like planetfall.
Either or would work, I suppose.
Yeah. But that would be fun. That would be fluffy.
I was going to run a Black Crusade campaign actually and incorporate Battlefleet Gothic in there. In that, your Chaos Warband actually gets control of a ship, and then you go on missions using Battlefleet Gothic rules, and people have to play out the space combat using that. But yeah, that campaign never got off the ground, sadly, and I've now lost the campaign notes. So
Oh,
it's yes.
so that would be really cool because you could then
Oh, yeah.
incorporate kill team after you've done like little missions. Like if you're only setting like a little strike team out,
Yeah,
you could kind of have that kind of run like almost like a parcel run, and then drop it into kill team, and then the mission back to. That would be really cool. Months and months and months of playing, but that would be really cool.
that's what you want from an RPG, but yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that is kind of the point of an RPG. Although the amount of prep that would be needed for that and all of the bookkeeping.
You could probably even work it into Wrath of Glory, and you can do an actual RPG on top of it. So you could have your own. You could be your own character.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. That's kind of what like the Black Crusade rules for. If you remember, it just kind of boiled down to a party of chaos egomaniacs all vying for power and trying to pursue their agenda of either becoming immortal or just I don't know, revenge or this whatever motivates sort of heretics. But yeah, I think actually I didn't think of Kill Team, but Kill Team would actually have worked really well with it in doing some of the combat scenarios. I think I didn't mind the combat rules, but to actually do it through Kill Team, that's actually pretty inspired.
Might be something we have to look into in the future.
Yeah.
Probably for the best that you've lost the game notes now.
Get to rewrite them and make them better. But as far as games that we had, and part of the inspiration for tonight's topic, when we get to that, so both me and Marcus got into 2 games on yesterday, of 25 Power Crusade. I bought Get Ray Knights, thinking I'd be super funny and write the entire list using ChatGPT.
Wow.
That was an interesting experience, and there will be a video coming out on that soon because I screen captured all of it. Let's just say the AIs are not coming for any list writers' jobs anytime soon.
Well, it's funny that you mentioned that because there's a new wargaming app coming out, Voxline. Now we haven't seen a lot of it yet. We've only seen Lockie from Zorpazorp kind of endorsing it, so I don't know if he's endorsing or if he's actually part of the team. Coming out on Kickstarter pretty soon, but the whole idea behind it is supposed to be kind of encompassing. It's basically think Tinder for wargaming.
Oh, good lord.
So, you get the thing of who's playing what, where, and near you, and that kind of thing. But there's supposed to be a few other integrations, social media like. So the AI may be able to infiltrate with a little bit more directed information.
Oh, look, I'm sure it will be better at writing lists than ChatGPT because that's an extremely low bar. Minor spoiler for that video when it comes out, but ChatGPT does not seem to understand that you can't just reduce the number of models in the unit below the minimum to reduce the power to make it fit.
Wait, what?
Yeah, that's what it was trying to do. It was quite amusing.
Okay. A little out of the box thinking.
Look, it was creative thinking, that's for certain, and it didn't feel like talking to a person at all, to be honest. Maybe a person that doesn't understand how the game works and is just trying so hard to do the requests, but
also me.
Yeah, you. So cheating, basically.
Yeah,
but
I'm going to write all my lists in it from now on.
In the end, I ended up taking a couple of strike squads, librarian, and an apothecary. Which is where the ugly of the first game of this crusade came in. The game ended turn 1. On my turn,
I read this, yes.
I went first. It was Assassinate from the core book in the narrative play section.
Yeah.
So the deployment zones were 10 inches apart. I let my opponent start deploying first. He put his Necron Overlord, in a little ruin within 6 inches of the center of his deployment, thinking it would be nice and safe there. Spoiler alert, wasn't. We then went back and forth, and in the end, I just deployed in a line along the front of my deployment zone. Everything. Didn't deep strike anything, even though it could have all deep struck. There was then some immortals that he put in front of the Lord to try to screen it out, and a unit of 10 death marks up on a little platform.
Okay.
Because I was the attacker in the mission, I get to choose who goes first, and
Yep.
I chose to go first.
Of course.
I then proceeded to walk forward. I then
Just walk.
They all just walked forward.
How close to the edge of your deployment were you set up?
I was right up on the edge.
Okay.
Because the mission specified the attacker chooses who go first. I knew I was going first.
Of course, yeah.
No need to play cagey. So I walked forward. I'm now 4 inches from his front line.
Yep.
I then spend a CP to use my librarian to cast psychic powers on 3d6, discarding the lowest. I fire off Vortex of Doom. I roll 11. So it goes off. I then roll 6 on the 2d6, and because he had the psychic epistolary warlord trait, I forget its name, that gives +1 mortal wounds to his psychic powers. It dealt 7 mortal wounds, and then 1 mortal wound to the overlord. And because it's in the psychic phase, no reanimation protocol. So that's 7 immortals gone straight there.
Dumb ways to die.
The librarian then cast Purifying Flame and rolled 2 6s and a 5.
Ugh.
But the librarian had a relic that means that anyone within 9 inches of him can't take perils of the warp. They just don't perils. So no perils, and that's D3 +3 +1 mortal wounds into the immortals. So the immortals are gone, no reanimation protocols. I then open fire with storm bolters and get the overlord down to like 3 wounds. I then make a 10-inch charge with a strike squad.
Ugh.
I'm sure you know what happened next. So overlord dead, mission accomplished, game over in about 15 minutes.
So this is how you got 2 games in.
Yes, this is how we got 2 games in.
Because you didn't even really have to set up for the next one. You only had to pull a couple of things back.
There was a bit more setting up for the next one because it was a different mission, but basically, that game was over at that point, and I didn't get to achieve my agenda for it because the game ended before I could wipe everyone else off the board because I made a charge I was not expecting to make. I declared the charge thinking it's a 10-inch charge. I'm not making it.
Yeah, it's pretty
They
flaky.
then made it. And 5 Grey Knight Strike Marines against 1 seriously wounded overlord, even with a 4-up invuln. I mean, he died to the mortal wounds from Tide of Celerity straight off the bat.
It is rough.
So that was unfortunate. So that's basically the ugly, as far as I can tell, of small games. Because they are so small, losing 1 unit is massive.
It is, and I think the issue is because 40k really does not scale down very well.
No, it does not. Not even slightly.
No, there's been a couple of things I've seen, like I've read on Reddit or just people talking in threads about how to fix the scaling down of 40k. A lot of people have been talking about reducing ranges and movements. So if you are playing, say, a patrol, your 6-inch movement, it's going down to a 4 or a 5-inch movement. Ranges are halved, those kind of things. It makes it actually playable. You get a first and second turn. Otherwise, same thing. You're 10 inches away to start with. You move 6 normally, where you don't even, there's no penalties or anything there. You then have, what bolter ranges are 24. Like
Mm.
it's like you're touching everything on the table.
Yeah, I think when it comes to games of that size, you end up with two possible outcomes where any other outcome other than these, the game's just not a good time for at least one person.
Yeah.
You either play stupid cagey, or if you know because the mission specifies that you'll get to go first, you play super aggressive.
And
Yeah.
look at yeah.
Because if you don't know who's going to go first, you have to play super cagey because a turn one because you're already so close. A turn one psychic phase can be devastating. As we found out, Marcus, in our game that we had after that one, even one turn of shooting can be absolutely devastating if your army is kitted out to lean into shooting.
Yeah, absolutely.
Um,
Yeah, I think the problem with, because we both played the assassinate mission, and I don't understand the variation between the missions design, but that assassinate mission with only starting 10 inches apart, you still have 5 turns to cross what is a small board.
oh yeah,
yeah.
It's not a big ask for, I think, even probably the slowest armies, unless you have chosen very poorly and taken, very slow units. And even then, I think that those units, if they've got guns, that they should still be able to get into a firing position within 5 turns. So I don't understand why the design was you start 10 inches apart, given that supply mission that we played. You only had a sliver of your deployment zone,
yeah.
and the rest of it was no man's land.
We started like 22 inches apart in that game.
Yeah, which is a normal no man's land distance in even a strike force, whatever, incursion, even onslaught games, the larger 2,000 points plus kind of games. So yeah, I think that game was just that mission is just not terribly well designed. I mean, I can understand why they probably chose to have the reduced no man's land, but I think that is a massive reason why games could end prematurely, like
Very quickly.
Yeah, I mean, the one that I played against Chris with his sisters, I did have a fairly slowish army, and I moved forward carefully, but it did take the full 5 turns, but by playing with his vehicles and blocking me and that, it was able to sort of slow things down. But I do think it was a massive problem with the mission design that really, and I think with the difference in the tables as well, I think from the memory, that Necron Lord was placed, there wasn't too much cover, and whether or not Sean, who was playing Necrons, could have placed that Lord in a better cover. Was it a fixed position for the character in that mission, or
it had to be within 6 of the middle, so he could have placed it further back, but I don't think he was expecting just the sheer stupid number of mortal wounds that librarian dishes out.
Yeah.
Because Grey Knight Librarian, he's a psyker in an army of psykers. He is a buffed up psyker. He goes proper mental on everything. I mean, generally the strategy with him is you deep strike him, and then the turn you deep strike him, you're dealing out between 13 and 15 mortal wounds on average.
Yeah.
But here's the thing, on a board where you're starting 10 inches away, you're basically deep striking from there anyway.
Well, that's why I didn't deep strike, because I was like, I can just
Why?
start right up here. Why wait till turn 2?
I can do it a turn earlier.
Why wait till turn 2 and have my other stuff murdered before I get to do anything?
See, but that's probably why I like boarding action so much, because it is the smaller games. I really like small games, always have. But you don't really get that because there's so much line of sight blocking terrain with all the walls everywhere. You have to move to be able to interact. It's one of those things where they didn't have to set the limitations, even just in list building, the limitations that they applied work really well, because you can't just send a Harlequin bike and it be 3/4 across the table first turn. But no, it's for those same reasons why the missions and stuff like that. You don't come into contact, overwhelming contact, I should say, in the first turn, which is always pretty bad. It's my biggest argument with the deployment when they're divided into table quarters, and you have 6 inches in the middle of that no man's land between the quarters. That's it.
Yeah, it's just right up into the corners of the 2 squares.
Yeah, and I'm hyper aggressive, so I just kind of do the whole thing in a crescent shape, and everybody just goes across the board. That's it.
Yeah, you play Cornate everything.
Except for Corn.
Except for Corn, which is rather amusing. But I think you've really struck on the point there, Callum. I think for small games, especially in narrative, because let's be honest, you don't play small games in match play.
No, I wish we did.
Boarding actions is definitely the way to go with it. The 3 25 power level missions in the core book, at least a third of them are just not great missions.
I reckon they could be all right if you, when you're setting the table, if you were thinking more along the lines of a heavy terrain kill team table instead of what we're used to seeing in match play. I reckon if you just took those standard missions but absolutely crammed the table full of terrain to make it interesting, you're blocking a lot more things, you're creating certain paths and that kind of thing, I think it could be a lot more playable there. Because you're definitely not ending up that close and being able to touch everything turn 1.
Yeah, that was the problem.
You played 2 games on that one board, whereas I played one in a more congested terrain setup. I found that to be the better game. You actually had to move to get sort of line of sight or same mission, so it was easier for the sisters to stay alive. So it would have been interesting to see how someone went on that other board that no one used, other terrain setup.
Well, that had a massive piece of line of sight blocking terrain right in the middle, so that would have changed things drastically.
Yeah.
But that's just me. I love heavy terrain boarded.
Oh, I agree. So. I'm currently sculpting up some historical walls based off of a local fort here in Newcastle.
The one up near Anal Point?
Yeah, that one.
Okay.
Yeah, it should be pretty great. Once, I finally finish sculpting it and then spend the 200 hours printing all of the little pieces.
Are you gonna design and print off a Pasha Bolka just off the coast of it?
I wasn't going to, but I am now.
But I am now.
That's
make
happening.
It playable.
Oh, look, I'll even make it so that like there's oil spilling out of it because that happened.
And it's if you make a building like the Cambridge, because the floors are always so damn sticky, you've got to be able to. That's rough terrain.
It's difficult ground.
It's reducing movement by a minimum of 3 inches.
Yep.
I've lost a shoe in the Cambridge. That's how sticky those death floors were.
When I play Fallout Wasteland Warfare on it, it'll be you get your move and charge with a reduced range color.
Wait, Fallout Wasteland. That's just based on King Street, isn't it?
Yeah, pretty much.
Yeah.
Just specifically the Mac is at King Street.
Oh yeah. It's literally the only part of Newcastle I've ever had any trouble in.
Yeah,
I don't live in Newcastle anymore because of fucking Macca's.
Yes, that's the reason. But look, moving on to the game that we had, Marcus, which was it lasted longer, so that's a good start. It was a supply drop mission, and I made several big mistakes before the game started. One, I showed up. That's always a mistake I make. Mistake 2 was I was expecting to have one side of the board when we were playing out the objectives. And then when we rolled, I got the other side of the board. So that hurt a lot.
I didn't pick that. I thought you could have gone either way. So I didn't sort of pick the deployment zone just to screw you over there.
No, I know. I'd kind of just subconsciously. It wasn't even until like after we got halfway through the game that I realized that I'd done this. But I'd subconsciously put the middle objective further towards one of the deployment zones than the other, without thinking, oh, I'm not actually guaranteed to get this deployment zone. I was like, well, I've just screwed myself. And then, yeah, again, the lack of cover. You're playing Iron Warriors, the lack of line of sight blocking terrain.
Yeah, that hurt.
Those squads of Havocs just ripped through my stuff so fast it wasn't funny.
Yeah, they're good against infantry, any kind of tough infantry. Not so much, and particularly vehicles. I don't find that tank hunters, tank destroyers strat very useful. But it gives them something against tanks. I find that strat actually better for bolters or something that don't have even a high strength that you're looking to really probably like on Terminator or something. But yeah, thankfully we don't have vehicles in our list yet. But
yeah, something that just gets the volume of shots out to really take advantage of
I
the
just wanted
sixes.
some really nasty Iron Warriors list are just laying down massive amount of fire, moving out the board fairly slowly, as Iron Warriors do. But yeah, that was just unfortunate. We didn't have we played on that table as opposed to, because again, if we played on the table that I'd played the first game on, there was more line of sight blocking terrain, which would have allowed you to creep up and bash my face in.
Yeah, because let's be honest, once it was what, 2 Grey Knights actually made it to close combat, and they murdered shit pretty hard when they got in there. It was only 2 of them, but once they're in there, they've got enough attacks, and there's power, there's strength, there's AP. They shred most things they hit in close combat. It's getting them to combat in that game that really screwed me. And then on top of that, I had to advance my librarian up to be able to get his psychic powers off, because I was like, if I don't get any powers off turn 1 with him, he's not making it to turn 2 no matter what I do. So I advanced him, just ran him straight out the front so I could get in range. And then Marcus shrugged my mortal wounds anyway.
Yes, a new strat that I didn't think was probably that useful.
It was very useful in that matchup. And me not being able to deny your psychic powers because you kept rolling 9 or higher on them.
Yeah, that is why I took that rally. It is quite good, particularly given one of the other chaps that I haven't played yet with the Iron Warriors. He's got a pretty dirty Eldar list.
Every Eldar list is dirty. Callum, we're looking at you.
Oh, I have some bangers.
And
is the Shuriken list viable again?
Yes. Yes,
one.
it is. It is very viable again because there is no armor of contempt. So those 6s to hit that auto wounds automatically get their minus their AP.
Yeah, it did sound pretty good.
Gross. I hate it so much.
And now there's no AOC. I think it's been slept on for a little too long. So in the beginning there was some chances to see it in competitive play, but probably not now, especially after World Eaters. Although it would be really handy for World Eaters.
Yeah. Oh yeah. I think that would do quite well against World Eaters, given they tend not to take a lot of tough stuff. I mean, most of their stuff is still, T4, maybe T5 with Spawn. People are going to be running those.
Yep. The Spawn are a big thing.
I'm quite surprised. I've always been one not to want to rely on rolling 5s to wound, but when you've got volume, it doesn't really matter. And I've seen that with my, the chain cannons. I've also seen it. I fought a list a few weeks back with my Corn Demons against Chaos Knights, and I thought I was going to get absolutely stomped on. Because everything was T7, T8, Knight, and I rolled enough 5s to wound that I actually brought that list down fairly comfortably, actually. So
well, that really is a part of the problem with big vehicles in the current edition, is that because you can wound everything on a 6 regardless of your strength and its toughness, you're gonna get those if you roll enough dice, you're gonna get through.
Just ask Zach. I took out his I can't even remember what they're called.
I'd love to ask Zach, but he's being a dog and he's not here tonight.
Those custody grab tank things.
Oh, those things are a pain.
Not when you have 400 shuriken shots. And I only actually, I think I put like a 2, maybe 3 units into it, and it just disappeared.
Yeah, well, when you roll that many dice, you're going to get enough 5s and 6s that he can't make that many saves.
Well, here's the thing: like, I only needed the 6s to hit because they auto wound, and they count as a 6.
Which
So
is proper
that's
broken. If you roll if
Yeah.
you have an auto wound on a 6 roll, it shouldn't count as a 6.
But see, this one is specifically does.
Oh,
for
I know, it
shurikens. That's
specifically
the
says
issue.
that.
Yeah.
But in my opinion, that's just sloppy rule writing. It's just
Well,
not
see,
thinking
it's
about how it will be abused. And because of dickheads like you, Callum, it will be abused.
well, see, here's the thing. Like, that was what the entire judgment token thing was kind of predicated on.
Yeah. Yeah.
So when that got nerfed 6 days after release, you know, I laughed in Elder.
Look, Cal, just go to the next LVO, take the shuriken list, and watch
I
how
was
quickly it gets nerfed.
I was actually invited to this LVO that just passed, but I couldn't make it to Vegas in fucking January.
Shame.
Ugh. But I was going as a YouTuber, not a player. Ugh. I am considering Adepticon next year, however.
That could be fun.
Yeah, LVO was still you run Armed Contempt, so it wouldn't have been.
It wouldn't have done me any well.
It would have
Yeah,
picked anyone that's not
gives you an
Space
idea
Marines.
to defeat a Custodes player that, he's just unstoppable.
And did you hear the issues with their live stream?
No.
So there was I think it was one of the finalist games where it was being streamed live, and it was full position, like this mattered. The judges stuffed up the primary scoring in one of the turns, and it was still awarded as was scored, but it was spoken about at length afterwards. But it was the difference between winning and losing the game. It would have been a completely different outcome.
But I didn't know the details. So that's it, is it? Yeah, right.
Yeah, and it was a big thing. I had to hand it to both players. They handled it really, really well, especially the guy that was somewhat cheated out of a victory, because he would have placed very, very highly if he had won that game.
Didn't that involve one of the eventual winners, the Blood Angels?
Yeah.
Yeah.
That was the issue. It was such a big pivotal game. It wasn't like it was one of the early matches where the points could have been made up, or they probably could have called it a draw and worked the points out later in the tournament. It was far too long for that. It was in the finals. But big drama. And that, of course, it was the live streamed one. So
it always is, isn't it, though?
Yeah.
It's always when all of your dirty laundry is out in public that it's a problem.
Yeah, it's rough. But no, it's they handled it quite well. As much as meta players kind of get a lot of shit, and sometimes deservedly so. This was one of the instances where they were very, very good about the outcome and mistake, and it wasn't taken too seriously. We've seen some pretty big arguments with a lot more minor issues in competitive play. So, hats off to the two. I can't even remember the names, to be honest. One of them was Australian, but no, real big hats off to the guys that can get there. Because I'm telling you, if I got up to that kind of level after I'd flown my ass from Australia to Las Vegas, and I was cheated out of a victory that high up an event, I wouldn't have only just flipped my table. I would have gone around the closest table within a radius of myself and flipped theirs too. Like that's
It did. The from what I did hear, the limited details, it did sound. I know cheating is a very strong word, but the resolution for that issue seemed to favour that Blood Angels player who eventually went on to win. And I had heard that there wasn't the first incident where the bigger teams, players from those were favoured in judge decisions and whatnot. And I think that's a risk for tourney's credibilities when you're going to favour the people with the rep and whatnot.
Most definitely.
Yeah, that's a big deal. Like we've seen it a fair bit in esports as well. Like there was
Yeah.
actually a Tekken tournament, um, a similar issue where the points were recorded. They were recorded correctly, but the scoreboard didn't reflect that. So the announcers didn't announce the correct score and the correct winner.
Oh, that's rough.
Um, and it seems to be the same thing. The resolution went to the bigger E team at the time, and no, it's I don't know. It's rough. Like we expect it from things like NRL and NBA, and massive money drawing followed sports. But yeah, rough times.
Mm. Yeah.
It's far from ideal. That's for certain.
Yeah, but no. Back to these little games.
Yes,
The
back to
good, the
little
bad, and the
games though.
ugly.
So yeah, we've definitely been over the ugly. The bad bit is that there's just very few missions for them, and they're not very well written.
Yeah.
But the good bit is they are much quicker,
Yes.
which means you can fit in 2 or 3 games in an afternoon.
Yeah. And see, that's the part that I've always really liked about small games like 500 points ish. I've always loved the idea, especially if you have an opponent that can just kind of go with the flow with you. You can get an entire game in half an hour, 45 minutes if you're really on the ball.
And
And like it's
an entire
enjoyable. It
game,
doesn't
as in
drag out.
not just the first turn, and the game
Yeah,
ends.
yeah.
Unfortunately.
Yeah.
Yeah, but like that's kind of it is one of the big drawbacks to 2000 points match play is
It
those
drags
games
on for a
can
couple of
really,
hours.
really drag on. Yeah. And it's kind of like tattoos. You forget the pain, and then you go back for another one, and then it all comes rushing back.
Yep.
Those last few turns, they can get pretty grueling.
Oh yeah. And
Even if you're winning, they can be grueling.
even if you're winning and you're like, I know I'm going to win, but we have to actually finish the game so I can actually win.
Yeah. Yeah, no, that's always been a big problem that I've found with massive games. I've always liked smaller ones, and I found smaller lists. It obviously restricts you a lot more without actually adding ridiculous restrictions. Like it's just
Oh
point
yeah.
value.
Yeah.
So like back in the day, Jono, you'll remember my 500 point Eldar list
That was actually
consisted
really
of
fun to fight.
it was. It could so Marcus. It could. I had 500 points in early 9th edition before the new Elf Codex, which consisted of 5 Dire Avengers, 1 Spirit Seer as a HQ, and 2 Wraith Seers, and that was it.
Wow.
Look, Castle and Crow thoroughly enjoyed dicing up all of your shit. He's just a beat stick in close combat.
that it did well with. Yeah.
Well, there's a
but
problem
like,
with the low points. Sorry, just to interject before you continue. There's a problem with the low points because if you've got one strong unit which can is kind of out of place in sort of low point limits games, and I remember doing way back when Crusade mission, and I took Khan in there, and when he wasn't the target of an assassination, and there was an assassin, one of the other people took, who nearly sniped in one go. He was just a beast, and he was really out of place in the small level games. And you can take units that are too strong. And I think one of the beauties of those the lower point lists games is that you can take it does balance out the game a bit in that you're forced to take the lower power units.
I mean, that's the thing with this Crusade, Marcus. And I actually had to do the Chat GPT thing twice, which only people watching this podcast will know now when that video comes out. But I was originally telling it to put an assassin in, and then I went and looked at the missions, and it was like, there is a 30% chance that this is going to result in some true feels bad moments. When just turn 1, I'm just like, so my Vindicare assassin is going to target your warlord. Oh look, it hit. Oh, and it wounded. Oh, there's 3 wounds.
I've nearly had it happen.
No arm
Calm was down to
saves.
1 wound.
No invulnerable saves. Oh, look, I rolled a 3. That's another mortal wound. And then a 4. And then oh, look, your warlord's dead. Oh no. How did that happen?
But I think Marcus is right. Like it really does cut you down to. I like the choices it makes you kind of fall
Yeah.
into. We're all very used to, especially later in ninth, especially after chaos. We're all very used to throwing on the marks of chaos, throwing on all this extra war gear, and bits and pieces like that. But you really can't do that in a stripped down low level point game. Like you can't take legionaries are what 90 points base. You can't throw the additional 50 60 points that you may need on them like you would in 2000 points match play.
Counter
You just
argument to
can't do
that
it.
though. If you're playing a game that small, chances are you're not using points. You're probably using power because
Yes.
you're doing narrative. At which point you throw everything on.
Well, see, that's a little bit different, but again, I don't play narrative stuff
You
that
should
much.
play narrative.
I don't have the attention span to want to do one thing for that long.
This is true.
I like to try many things out. I have a ridiculous amount of lists on Battlescribe, things that I'll never ever use, but an idea I've come up with that has potential. Or if I'm feeling fluffy that day and just want to run aspect warriors, but just striking scorpions, with their guys. I don't have the attention span for that. I like to do many other things very quickly.
How would it work in Legion though, for example? Because if I could use a bolt action example, that knowing the rules, that if someone took a sort of even a scout car or some light vehicle in a small point list and was able to jam it in, and the other opponent just went infantry only, they probably wouldn't take any kind of AT. So it'd kind of skew the game in that one side has absolutely no capability to take out the big nasty. In a larger game, that big nasty is pretty pitiful. How would it work in a Legion game, for example? Well, I mean, could that blow out or are you forced to take only smaller units that really can still hurt one another?
It's one of those things. There's an issue with Legion's match play at the moment that a lot of people are finding, that you can take your really cool big lore stuff. You can grab your speeders or your dewbacks. Dewbacks are fantastic in the game at the moment, and your force users. So Vader, Yoda, Luke, those kind of things. But they're expensive, and in a game where you only actually get 800 points to build an entire match play list. For example, base stormtroopers are like 54 points for a unit of 5. So the points are very comparable to 40k at the moment when you think those kind of things. Like Vader is roughly the same price as a Chaos Lord in Terminator armor, those kind of things. So it is kind of like writing a list for just 800 points of 40k. But it then comes down to scoring. So a lot of people at the moment are running things like B1 droids and just mass amounts of them.
That's what B1 droids are for.
Exactly. It fits in thematically, but also then you have an overwhelming amount of models that can hold objectives, and that's the hard point. It's the point scoring. As much as it's different to 40k, it's still very similar in a lot of the base mechanic kind of ways, if you want to think about it like that.
Which means the competitive players are just as fucking toxic.
Look, there has been some pretty gross competitive play in the short few years that Legion's been big enough to have competitive tournaments. It just doesn't have the following yet that 40k does to have that really overwhelming behemoth kind of thing. But no, very very similar to 40k as far as that goes. Like you can definitely put your big bad units in there, but they cost you, and almost everything is kind of like every match play game is kind of like playing slightly less than 1,000 points in 40k. So it brings into that same thing. Do you take the things that you know can score constantly so you have a chance of winning, or do you take something massive that you know will mow down your opponent's chance of winning? It's that same balancing act, and you can't just keep throwing everything into it. But same kind of deal. You take the big nasty if you want, but it's a plus in one column but a negative in another.
Yeah.
So it becomes balanced, and I think that's why a lot of people have taken to Legion, especially because it is basically a slightly scaled down version of 40k, just with different dice mechanics and that kind of thing.
That
And
having the Star Wars
cool.
IP on it.
Yeah.
Look, one thing I'm sure we can definitely agree on though. The competitive scene for either Legion or 40k or Sigma or any of these tabletop games will never be as completely janked as Magic the Gathering's competitive scene.
I see your reasoning, and I raise you Yu-Gi-Oh! Competitive card game.
Valid point. That's a valid point.
I used to own a store, and while the Magic players can get a bit much, sometimes it has to be a heated moment. Yu-Gi-Oh! Players come in at a friendly level and flip tables and throw hissy fits, and it's a great one. The only people that I have ever banned from the store, or kind of had to remove them for the evening, were Yu-Gi-Oh! Players. Yu-Gi-Oh! Players were also the reason I had to put a sign at the front door saying, "If you have not showered, you are not playing." Like, that was a legitimate sign that was at the door, at the entrance of my shop.
And thus we have evidence as to how the Australian education system has failed so many children.
It's just one of those things. Yu-Gi-Oh! Is definitely probably the harsher of the lot.
Look, that's a valid point, but the reason I said Magic is because I have personal experience with some of the grossness that you get with Magic. Stacks decks. Do I need to? I shouldn't need to say more than that. Basically, it's a deck built around the philosophy of there's only so much fun to be had, and I'm gonna have all of it.
Well, see, that's fine, but that is the entirety of thinking of Yu-Gi-Oh! If you've ever seen a Yu-Gi-Oh! Competitive game, every single list from every single player is built to they get one turn, and they do every single thing in that turn to the point where the opponent does not get a turn.
Well, the game's fundamentally flawed in that regard, in the sense that there's no hard limit on how much stuff you can do, whereas at least in Magic, turn one, you can have one, maybe 3 mana to play with.
And that's the issue. There's no energy. Like Dragon Ball Super takes energy, Pokemon takes energy, Magic takes land, takes energy. In Yu-Gi-Oh! It is just, what does the card say? And then, what do you have there? But there's always another mechanic of finding the card that you need to, set this off, which will then in turn chain reaction into this, which you have the next card that you've gone in to find, and it's horrible.
Oh, look, Zach says that dice game and card game bad. Maybe we should introduce him to Yu-Gi-Oh!
I actually think Zach would enjoy Yu-Gi-Oh! If he sat down and actually played it. That is his kind of game.
No, it's not.
It is. Not. That is so Zach.
No, it's not. He'd fucking hate it so much.
He would hate that he loved it. That would be the issue.
Look, that's fair. We're running low on time though, so Marcus, you're the guest here, so I'm going to flip the squats coin, and we're going to see if it comes up heads or tails, and we will either discuss how we're going to nerf a overpowered unit of your choice, or fix up an underpowered unit, depending on what it comes up as. Almost missed that one. It is squats. It's always squats.
It's always squats.
Look,
we've had one episode.
Look, it's a fair coin. Just so you all know.
All right, Marcus, what's overpowered?
What is overpowered?
Grey Knight Librarians.
Look, I agree with you on that one.
Of any unit, or have you moved away from the Leagues of Votan, given they've had their...
any unit doesn't need to be Votan. It's just the Votan coin is sitting here, so it's convenient.
I have to say that having played against, and they've copped a bit of stick in a group that I've been playing with a little bit of late, and that is Custodes. And I watched a video on All Specs Tactics, and it did basically a breakdown of Custodes units. And the list I played against, it had, and All Specs' video was done after I played this list, but he didn't take anything out of the top 4. So I think that the problem, since in 8th Ed everyone had lots of rerolls, and I'm thinking that given that Custodes still have a huge amount of rerolls, we moved away from that in 9th, but they've kept it, and trying to find. I think the bikes probably annoy me the most, given that they have the speed, they have toughness 6, I think 5 or 6 wounds. For 5 points, you get that salvo launcher that's strength 8 -4, D3 +3. And I played my Khorne Demons. I know it was suicidal, but I thought I'll give it a go. I lost heavily. I was pretty much out of the contest turn 1. Again, I also lost heavily against Admech, a Cataphren heavy list. But against the Custodes, I wasn't expecting 9 of these salvo launchers at me in.
They're disgusting.
And and getting the rerolls from the captain, because they were obviously big Death Star around this captain, getting rerolls. There was very little I could do. So I think that they do need to be toned down. There's a great reliance on those bikes in Custodes list, and I think that they don't need to be as strong as they are with Leadership 11, because that was a major weakness with demons, because I couldn't manifest close to them like I can with a lot of other factions, and at least maybe get a charge in. So it was really painful. So I think that based on that experience, I mean, there's obviously many units in the Custodes list, but I think those bikes are just people overly rely on them, and for good reason, because they're just so efficient. They're 80 odd points, and I just cannot see them ever not bringing back their points. What could be done? What do you think? Have you played it?
I have 2 ideas. One is the very obvious, because I have played against Custodes with those bikes, and they are disgusting. They need to be more expensive.
And
hands
soon
down.
you will again.
No, I won't, because
Zachary's army is nearly finished.
Yeah, but Zach keeps wimping out of weekends, and I think he'll keep doing that. Although maybe once he has these Custodes, he won't. But look, they've got to be more expensive. 80 points for those bikes is too cheap, plain and simple. And I think the rerolls have to be toned back is the only other valid solution. Because as you said, Marcus, most armies in 9th edition have had their rerolls toned back compared to 8th. Not Custodes.
I will 50% agree. I don't think the points wise, because I'm a big believer in, and Jono will give me shit for it, that point comparisons have to be looked at of what's available in their book to what you can do. I think comparing 80 points of that compared to 80 points of what you'd find in a different factions book is a rough way of looking at things. Just because when you look at the rest of the Custodes books with everything at the price they are, they still don't get to field that many things on the table. Which was an issue,
though, to be overpowered and gross, because those bikes alone are an army.
They are, and that's how people have been taking them, and Arcs of Omen will allow that even more so. But I think, and this is going to be, Zach would hate it.
Zach hates this whole discussion.
I don't think you should be able to take a captain on Dawn Eagle. If they didn't have the captain that could keep up providing all the various rerolls, I think that could really tame them in enough that there would be a chance. So people wouldn't be taking unit after unit after unit with them and having captains running everywhere with them.
So yeah, dial back the rerolls.
Yeah. The points thing, I think, that's here nor there, because Zach in 2,000 points gets what? If he doesn't take sisters, he has what, maybe 20 models? Max?
Yeah, but more than half of them are bikes, and the only reason he doesn't take more bikes is either he doesn't actually have more bikes, or
Zach won't take more bikes because he wants to have fun and won't just put somebody against bikes. because he thinks it's not fun on his side either.
Well, it's not fun on anyone's side.
But
Speaking from experience, winning a game turn 1 where your opponent doesn't get to take a turn, it's not fun.
actually,
not fun.
I do have. I'm guessing you guys haven't seen it. So on my YouTube channel, I do 40k in 40 seconds, where it's just basically it's just a single fight phase against 2 characters. I put the Iron Here champion from the Leagues of Votan up against 3 Virtus Praetors. The Virtus Praetors did not get a turn because the Iron Here one-shot all 3 of them.
Yeah, the only faction that I heard did manage to take out Custodes, like a good Custodes list. I think it was, I don't know if it was a competitive list, and I don't know, I can't speak to the skill of the player, but from what I was told, they weren't chumps, and it was a Leagues of Votan list actually managed to take out. So I was like, whoa, okay. You know, maybe that's the hard counter. I don't know, but if played well, maybe they can do it.
Well, see, the Iron Here champion with a mass hammer, which is only an extra 10 points, so it makes him like 100 and 110, 120 points, has the max potential to one-shot a knight in just fighting, which is crazy.
What's his average potential though?
Let's see. He's D3 plus 3 damage. He gets 5 attacks, hitting on 3s, wounding on yes. Fairly averagely, like, well, with me rolling, I roll slightly above average most times.
Let's just go with the average.
I can't do average, and I work everything off my dice. But he did 15 wounds to those 3 bikes, and that was out of that's out of 4 attacks. That is a lot. It's D3 plus 3. Like, that's massive when you start talking.
Yeah, so on average 5 wounds per pop. So you only need 3 of those attacks to go through to deal 15.
Yeah.
Which is pretty mental.
He does D3 mortal wounds when he charges. All the other fantastic squat stuff that he has, like you can't reroll wounds against him. He's -1 damage, -1 AP. All those kind of things that just stack and stack and stack for squats. And this was with no judgment tokens.
Gross.
This was just him going ham naturally.
I hate it. Bring back 3rd edition Necrons, please.
No, bring back 2nd edition Orc Dreadnoughts, the paper standees.
Also acceptable. Well, that's all she wrote for this evening. So make sure that you do all the YouTube things, like subscribe, all that stuff. Do whatever happens on Facebook. I haven't really been on Facebook in about a month now because it's toxic as shit. And Twitch I still don't understand because I'm old. And yeah, we'll see you all next time.
Cheerio, guys.